Welcome to Close of Business. I'm Alicia Barry. It's been a big week in politics, the country bracing for a 5-week election campaign. The Prime Minister's announcement overshadowed Treasurer Jim Chalmers' fourth budget, promising permanent but modest tax cuts. In his budget reply, opposition leader Peter Dutton vowed to repeal the cuts but upped the ante, slashing the fuel excise in half for 1 year. Whoever wins inherits a deficit slightly deeper than forecast in the mid-year economic update. While debt will initially be lower than previously expected, it is projected to accelerate over the forward estimates. In the short term, economic growth has been downgraded due to ex-tropical cyclone Alfred and a weaker global economy. Nadia Daly takes a look at what's in the budget for business.
This cafe is among the 2.6 million small businesses that the government calls the lifeblood of Australia's towns and cities. Twin brothers and owners Ali and Ahmed say their business is being squeezed by power bills.
Last year's probably been up about 33%, and we're paying about almost $7,000 a quarter.
They say the budget's $150 energy rebate is welcome relief, but doesn't go far enough.
I mean, it's not going to take a dent out of that.
Down the road, manager Lily Tan hopes the new tax cuts will put more cash in the pockets of her customers, who are watching every dollar when it comes to non-essentials like perfume.
Do you have to just give more incentive for the parents or for the family? I think more tax cuts is good.
The cuts will reduce the lowest tax bracket from 16 to 15% from July of 2026, and then 14% the following year, providing $268 of relief in the first year and $536 from the second year on. But it comes at a cost.
It's about $17.1 billion. So that's quite a lot of money. For an individual household, it's trivial. For the first year they operate, in 26-27, it's just $5 a week for an average person on average wages, and in the second year it's only $10 a week, so it won't even buy you a sandwich and a milkshake.
Shops selling local produce hope the government's $20 million Buy Australia campaign will boost their bottom line, though the budget was thin on detail on just how the money would be spent. There's more cash for the competition watchdog to regulate the franchising sector and supermarkets, extra money for the corporate regulator ASIC to clamp down on phoenixing, support for the hospitality sector, including a 2-year freeze on draft beer excise, a national licensing scheme for electricians to work across states and territories, which could be expanded to other trades and potentially lift GDP by $10 billion a year, with a further $5 billion boost hoped to come from banning non-compete clauses for workers earning less than $175,000 a year.
Non-compete clauses are a drag on productivity in the economy. We know productivity is an issue. The budget forecasts are quite optimistic going forward on those. So, every little measure we see is good.
Economists say while the energy rebates and other incentives are certainly welcome, they won't have a huge impact on consumers, businesses, or the economy as a whole.
I think there's a lot of talk in the budget for small business, but to be honest with you, I don't think that there's a lot in there which is really substantial.
A whiff of hope maybe, but businesses want more.
To be honest to you, $150 is not enough. Yeah, just is not enough to cover even 5% of the electricity bill. Yes, it's not.
In an economy that's been on the nose.
Workers will find it easier to switch jobs under the government's proposal to ban non-compete clauses for those on low and middle incomes. The government says the reform could boost the economy by up to $5 billion a year. But some businesses aren't happy, as Rihanna Whitson reports.
Jocelyn Fairs runs a busy retail business that rents out designer dresses.
I'm very blessed with my staff. My staff are loyal to me.
Alicia, how's everything going? That loyalty also requires staff to agree to a non-compete clause in their contract when they join her team.
I believe it's fair not to go to competitors or not to open up.
What do you think of this? It means her staff cannot work for or set up their own dress for hire business for 12 months after they resign.
My time and my energy goes to my staff, and I wouldn't be able to function if they were to leave with my customers also.
Around 3 million workers have non-compete clauses in their employment contracts. The Albanese government will ban them for workers earning up to $175,000 a year. Research suggests it could lift wages by between 2 to 4%, or up to $2,500 a year, and potentially increase annual GDP by up to $5 billion.
These clauses are things that basically stop workers being able to leave jobs and go and work in another one where they'd be paid better and have better conditions. It's really having employers own workers or bond them to stay working for them.
We don't think that this approach is the right approach. We think that the better approach is education, not regulation.
This former chair of the Productivity Commission says many workers don't know they're covered by a non-compete clause.
It may be the case that many non-compete clauses are in fact unenforceable if they were to be challenged in the courts. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have no practical effect. For many workers, there can be a chilling effect.
Non-compete clauses are often used to stop high-level employees and executives from switching to a competitor. But legal aid lawyers say they're also being used to stop lower-paid workers from getting a better job. People who can't afford to take their boss to court.
Jocelyn Fairs says without non-compete clauses, her business is at risk.
Well, I'm not really happy, or I would say it's a positive for my business if they lift those clauses. There needs to be a competitive edge. There needs to be a time frame for all businesses.
This business doesn't use non-compete clauses, but still isn't happy about the policy announcement.
Non-compete is irrelevant. There's definitely different mechanisms we could have used to promote manufacturing.
Real tax reform, talk about real IR reform.
Connie Walker says there is nothing in the budget for the manufacturers she represents, like this sheet metal business. The managing director is also angry about the instant asset write-off being slashed.
We need real government policy to enable innovation so that manufacturers can grow from small to medium to large.
A budget setting the tone for the federal election.
On budget night, I went out to a pub in Sydney's inner west and spoke to the owner, Troy Phillips, to get a reaction from the front bar. Troy, welcome. Did the Treasurer get it right for small business tonight?
Alicia, I don't think there's a lot there for small business, the way I'm seeing it. They're losing the instant asset write-off. I don't think there's no one's going to be running out and investing in equipment or back in the business on the back of that budget, I don't think.
There was some specific announcements for hospitality with producer rebates for the wine growers and also the freeze on the excise for draft beer. Will that help your margins? Oh, well, the draft beer excise is great. That was telegraphed. That was needed. I think the punters, the publicans and the brewers are going to love that one. The wine industry is going to like that initiative, and I think gastropubs and restaurants are going to benefit from that. So that's probably a good one as well for the hospitality industry. But the hospitality industry needs it. When it comes to getting more money in the doors of your venues, do you think the cost of living measures are going to help? Of course, we saw the energy bill rebates extended, albeit a bit smaller, and $17 billion in tax cuts.
I don't know if it's going to flow through. I don't think the energy rebate is going to be enough. I think we need more. We need more than that. I don't think it's going to flow through in hospitality. No.
What kind of measures have you been taking to encourage people to turn up?
Well, early in the week, Monday, Tuesdays, you've got to have an offering. You've got to have some really good food and bev offerings. You've got to do a bit of heavy discounting, and have trivia nights, darts comps. You need to have a lot going on to get people out and about early in the week in Sydney at the moment.
And what's the general mood been? Has it been working?
Yeah, it has been working. People love it. People love good value for money. I mean, pubs offer something for the local community, and they offer really good food, great value food, and it's a really good family and community vibe here in Balmain, so it works for us.
What do you think the government could be doing better to help small business?
Look, I think they did a great job through COVID. The previous government did a great job through COVID, and I think that a lot of small businesses probably got addicted to a free kick. I think post-COVID, small business is really struggling, and Australia's built on the back of small business. And I just think that we need to have a real hard look. I think the Business Council and the government needs to get together ASAP and work out in capital cities how small business, particularly hospitality, go forward, because it's bloody tough out there.
Troy Phillips, thank you so much for giving us your time tonight. We really appreciate it. The Australian Industry Group represents the interests of 60,000 businesses of all sizes across the country. To look at what the major parties are offering business more broadly, CEO of AiGroup, Innes Willox, joined me. Innes Willox, welcome to Close of Business.
Hi Alicia, good to see you.
Innes, we just heard from a small business owner who's disappointed about the instant asset write-off falling back to $1,000 under Labor. The Coalition, of course, announced it plans to increase it to $30,000 on an ongoing basis. Is this a big decider for business?
Well, it's a very important issue, Alicia, because the instant asset write-off has been a very successful program now for many years, and businesses taken advantage of that, particularly smaller businesses, to make the purchases they need to keep their business running, but also importantly to grow their business. So we've been alarmed for some time that the program hasn't been able to pass the Parliament, and we were disappointed on budget night that there was no mention of it, and it seemed to be kicked down the road. We're glad that the opposition has committed to it. We're glad that the government, through the Treasurer, has committed to continuing it. It is an important program, and the size and scope of it will be very important to business.
Cost of living is taking centre stage in this election now. Does business like the idea of tax cuts for households or cheaper fuel? Because it seems it's one or the other.
Well, it is one or the other. What we want to see with tax is structural tax reform. We're very concerned that the tax system as it now operates is a disincentive to invest, particularly by business. So we're particularly focused on the corporate company tax rate and how that is structured. We believe 25% is an appropriate rate for governments to aspire to for the corporate tax rate to make us competitive. On income tax, we believe in simplification and a fairer system. I know there's a lot of conversation now around possible indexation, and that crops up every now and then. That's one possible solution that needs to be worked through. We'd actually like government, whoever that may be, to go back to what were the stage 3 tax cuts and take out that 37% tax rate for income, because we see that as a major disincentive and a big blocker when it comes to bracket creep. Fuel tax rebates, I think, are going to be important for consumers. We're happy to see either put more money in consumers' pockets because that's good for business. We won't take a side. In the end, that's up to individual voters to decide. There is some complexity around fuel tax rebates when it comes to the private transport sector that would probably need to be worked through. Last time there was a rebate cut, there were concerns that it wasn't able to be passed on to that sector. But in the end, putting more money into people's pockets to allow them some relief and to spend, we think is a good thing.
Well, the Coalition has proposed an onshore gas reservation policy. Is it late to the party on this? Should have been done earlier.
We know, and we have known for a long time, we've had gas shortages, and we're going to come to a moment of reckoning. So at the moment we seem to be at a choice between mandatory codes of conduct for the gas industry, gas importation terminals as one option, and now domestic gas reservation of East Coast gas. The fact is that we are running short of gas. We are looking at energy shortfalls later this decade. Gas has always been the bridge between fossil fuels and renewables. Look, any intervention like this is intervening in the market and can be seen as heavy-handed, but undoubtedly something needs to be done. If the Coalition is elected and goes ahead with this policy, obviously the details need to be worked through around existing contracts for gas export, around working with the states around gas exploration and extraction, and the price that they'd be looking at for domestic reserved gas. So, look, we're at a point now where we're getting to Hail Marys when it comes to getting our energy system right, but there's a lot of detail that we would need to work through on this domestic gas reservation. I would say, Alicia, I think at prima facie, at face value, it would have a lot of support from within the industrial base of Australia who are crying out for cheaper and more reliable gas. Whether this is the solution, we need to work that through in the detail. but it is trying to solve a real problem that we've created for ourselves.
But at the same time, private investment is flooding into renewables. I mean, that is also seen as a solution. Hard to wind that back.
Well, exactly. And look, to quote that phrase, why can't we have it all? We need an energy system that works. You can have all the industrial programs that you like in the world, but you're not going to be able to solve them or to bring them to fruition if you don't have a solid, secure energy base. I think that's the bottom line here. There's nothing wrong. In fact, we'd be strong supporters of more investment into renewables. In fact, business is quite agnostic around where its energy comes from, as long as it gets it at an affordable, competitive price.
Innes Willox, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Alicia.
Contentious laws designed to protect Tasmania's salmon industry have passed the federal parliament. It's brought relief to many people who live and work in the town nearest to the salmon farms. But environmentalists say it could fast-track the extinction of an endangered species.
For almost 18 months, Strahan residents have been worried about the future of their town and one of its main industries.
The thought of the fish farm closing down, families leaving, jobs going, school closing, medical centre closing, it would have a big impact.
But the supervisor of the local supermarket says the anxiety has now lifted.
I'm very relieved, I must say, and very happy about it. It will protect local jobs and keep people here.
Since late 2023, the Federal Environment Minister has been weighing up whether salmon farming in Macquarie Harbour should be scaled back or even shut down, amid concerns about its impact on the endangered Maugean skate. But after a tumultuous week in Parliament featuring stinky props,
Extinction salmon,
sideline heckling,
save the skate, Elbow,
and noisy protests, legislation designed to protect salmon jobs has now passed the Senate.
There being 30 ayes and 14 noes, it's resolved in the affirmative.
Almost a dark cloud of doom and a lot of scrutiny that's been hanging over their heads now for basically 2 years. So there's a feeling of relief, I think.
The legislation means the Environment Minister's review into salmon farming in Macquarie Harbour is now effectively over. But green groups say it's not the end of their campaign against the local industry.
All options are on the table right now. There is legal avenues to explore. The people all around the country have been shown just how terrible this industry is.
A battle between jobs and the environment that could sway votes in the upcoming federal election.
Headline inflation is comfortably inside the Reserve Bank's target band, but it's unlikely to force a rate cut next week. The monthly headline inflation fell to 2.4% in the 12 months to February from 2.5% according to official figures. The RBA cut the cash rate in February for the first time since 2020. But Chief Economist at Westpac, Lucy Ellis, says the RBA wants to see more evidence inflation is sustainably down before moving again.
Given how hawkish they were at the previous meeting, we absolutely do not expect them to do a back-to-back cut in April.
The market is pricing in a 13% chance of a rate cut next week. To the share market, which finished the week a little higher, the ASX 200 adding just over 0.5% and the All Ords up a little bit less by Friday. Julia Lee, Head of Client Coverage at FTSE Russell Investments, joined me. Julia, the budget and the election have grabbed the headlines in the last week. Did investors make much of that?
I guess if we have a look at elections and how they've impacted on the Australian share market in the past, we haven't seen a huge impact come through. For longer term investors, it's probably more about the earnings outlook as well as the outlook for the economy. However, when we have a look at the last 10 elections, 8 out of the 10 election years have seen a positive return for the share market. And not only that, when we have a look at the average return as well as the median return for the year, it's been higher than historically normal levels. So that's great news for investors. I think there's lots of theories about why this occurs, but it might also be because of the spending that's associated with an election year. And that's really going to feed into some fears this year because we know that inflation is a key concern of investors as well as homeowners.
Yeah, and when you talk about inflation, of course, we have an interest rate decision next week from the RBA. How likely is the calling of the election to impact that?
I think the markets really have the next interest rate decision on hold because of the election result. However, if we have a look to just after the election, the interest rate decision in May, markets are pricing in a 57% chance that we'll see a rate cut at that meeting, with an over 40% chance that we'll see no change and no chance that we'll see a rate hike. Of course, a lot of it is going to depend on inflation. So next week is going to be very important, where we'll get more news around tariffs out of the US on the 2nd of April, Liberation Day. So watching that very closely, but all up, just watching to see whether that extra government spending coming through in an election year also spurs on inflation. So in the month of April, we'll be watching those first quarter inflation numbers out of Australia very carefully, as well as the job numbers, which will feed into interest rate expectations.
Yeah, and we will get that quarterly read on inflation on the 26th of April, so not too far away. Now, over the week, we saw markets turn around on Friday. What's been driving the gains at the end of the week?
Well, we know the one thing that's been impacting negatively on markets is the tech sector. So we have seen a bit of a tech slump impacting on the market. But on the flip side, commodities have been doing very well. We've seen gold prices hitting all-time record highs, iron ore prices hitting a 2-week high, and we've also seen oil prices recording the 3rd week of gains. So all that has meant a turnaround in the Aussie share market, the materials, the energy sector doing well, although information technology not doing well, not only for today, but for the week, as well as for the month, being the worst performing sector for the month.
And Julia, you mentioned those tariffs. Of course, this week, the auto industry was in the sight of Donald Trump's trade war, and you say more to come next week.
Well, Australia already has a 25% tariff that's been implemented on aluminium as well as steel imports, and it looks like there could be more to come. Now, President Trump has labelled 2nd of April Liberation Day, where we're likely to hear about a range of tariffs as well as country-specific tariffs. So that's going to be a big day for markets as well as investors to have a look at the impact, not only globally, but also here in Australia, and the impact on inflation. Now, surprisingly, if we have a look at inflation in the US, there is a group called Price Stats which compiles online pricing information. And for the first quarter, there's been no signs yet that we've seen a hike in inflation in the US as you'd expect. However, it is early on, so just waiting to see whether that does eventuate later on in the year as markets are expecting.
Julia Lee, always great to get your insights. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alicia.
The superannuation industry is already in the sights of the corporate regulator for letting down its customers. Now, new data reveals 1 in 4 Australians are in the dark about their level of superannuation insurance cover. And as Nassim Kadem reports, learning the truth can be shattering.
Lyndall Jordan is battling cancer, so a fight with her super fund was the last thing she wanted.
Being through terminal illness, sickness takes over capacity to even live a normal life, let alone fight a David and Goliath fight. And between January and December, I was having treatment.
In 2023, Lyndall made an insurance claim with Aware Super and received an income protection payment of just $1,000 a month.
You don't have your dignity, you don't have your freedom to move around as you would because you're so sick, and your whole life changes.
Aware Super has apologised to her, saying there's always room to do better in how we handle insurance claims, but also said Miss Jordan was paid out the correct amount for her policy and encouraged members to check their level of cover. Like many Australians, Lyndall wasn't closely checking her annual statements and says she didn't realise she was only paying for a default insurance option with lower cover.
Whilst I have savings and I have some means, it's been really difficult, very difficult. Medical expenses that, everyday expenses. You're robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Each year, Australians pay $6.8 billion for insurance within their superannuation funds. New research shows 1 in 4 don't know what insurance they have in their super, and more than half of 25 to 29-year-olds are unaware default insurance normally starts at 25, even though they've recently passed this age.
It's often only at claim time that people realise that they don't have a policy that protects them. They often have to go through the process of making a claim in order to find out. And that can obviously lead to delays where there's a mismatch between what people think they've been paying for years and years and what they end up getting.
Corporate watchdog ASIC has put super funds on notice after launching legal action against industry giants Australian Super and Cbus for delays in their handling of death benefit and disability claims. The government has also called on super funds to do better when it comes to customer service.
Okay, member expenses. What have you found out today?
Consumer groups are calling for a Productivity Commission review and want to see mandatory timeframes for super funds to respond to claims.
Yeah. It's about putting obligations back on superannuation funds to deal with these claims in a timely way. At the moment, there is next to no obligations outside of some very high-level principles to protect consumers here.
Any reforms could come too late for Ms Jordan. She's calling on super funds to be more transparent and compassionate with members.
Your life changes completely when you receive a terminal illness diagnosis and you believe in the systems and processes that you've set up, and then you get this slap in the face.
A slap in the face many Australians feel they've had after making super insurance claims.
And that's all from Close of Business. I'm Alicia Barry. Thanks for watching.